I thought the casserole dish Sandra had placed on our kitchen counter was a peace offering. I had no idea it was the opening move in a calculated scheme to drain our savings, fracture my marriage, and strip me of everything I had spent a decade building, and that my own husband had been her willing accomplice from the very beginning. She arrived on a Friday in late October, 2 suitcases heavy enough to require Jason's help up the porch steps, with a smile so wide it left no room on her face for anything else. "Just a little break," she said, squeezing my hand with both of hers, her rings cool against my skin. "You know how it's been, sweetheart. The job was exhausting me. I just need a few weeks to breathe." I nodded, smiled, stepped aside to let her in. The casserole was chicken and rice, my least favorite, but I thanked her anyway. That was the kind of person I was then, the kind who said thank you for things she didn't want, who smiled at things that made her uneasy, who held doors open for people who had never once held one for her. My name is Clara Whitfield. I was 32, the director of product at a mid-sized tech firm downtown, earning just over $140,000 a year, and for 3 years I had been the primary breadwinner in a household I was enormously proud of. Jason, my husband of 4 years, was a freelance graphic designer with a genuinely good eye, a laugh that could fill a room, and a client base that fluctuated with the specific maddening unpredictability of creative work. There were months he brought home $2,000 and months he brought home 11, and we had arranged our lives around that variance in the way couples do when one of them is stable enough to be the foundation. I was the foundation. I had been the foundation long enough that I had stopped consciously thinking about it. The way you stop thinking about the walls of a room once you've lived inside it long enough. Our house was a 1930s craftsman bungalow on Elm Terrace, a narrow, tree-lined street where the oaks on either side met overhead in autumn and turned the whole block into a cathedral of burnt orange and gold. I had made the down payment myself 5 years before we married, the result of 7 years of disciplined saving. The kitchen had original pale yellow tile countertops, slightly uneven, that I refused to replace because I loved the way the late afternoon light turned them golden at around 4 o'clock. There was a reading nook off the bedroom with olive green linen upholstery and books alphabetized by author, and a back garden where 2 summers of work had produced raised beds that overflowed with tomatoes in July. I had painted the front window trim myself on a warm Saturday 3 years ago, standing on a borrowed ladder with a podcast in my ears and a sense of ownership so complete it felt almost sacred. This was my home, mine first, and even after it became ours, I never let myself fully forget that. Jason and I worked well together the way people with opposite temperaments sometimes do. My structure balanced his spontaneity. His warmth softened what he affectionately called my spreadsheet brain. We had rituals I treasured. Coffee on the back steps every Sunday morning, the same Ethiopian blend, neither of us speaking for the first 10 minutes, his hand finding mine somewhere during the second cup. He left small notes in unexpected places. Under my keys, tucked inside my laptop bag, once taped to the bathroom mirror at a height that suggested he'd been on his toes. I believed we had something rare. I believed that completely, right up until the moment I had reason not to. Sandra was a different matter. Jason's mother was 58, trim and carefully maintained, with highlighted blonde hair and a disposition that made every room she entered feel subtly smaller. She was not cruel. I want to be precise about that because this is not a story about a cartoon villain. She was something more dangerous than cruel. She was a woman who had concluded, long before I arrived in her son's life, that the world owed her comfort and that the people nearest her were obligated to provide it. She had never stated this as a philosophy. She didn't need to. It lived in the way she accepted hospitality without reciprocating it, in the way she referred to Jason's variable income as the money and mine as Clara's income, a distinction that carried, every time I heard it, the weight of some undisclosed agenda. She had worked, with varying enthusiasm, as an office manager at a dental practice for most of Jason's adult life. The job, by her account, was beneath her. The commute too long, the dentist too demanding, the parking at the strip mall a years-long source of grievance. I had filed these complaints under things easier to absorb than resist, along with her observations about my haircut and her pointed silences whenever I mentioned a work achievement. Jason would catch my eye across the dinner table with a small, apologetic smile, and I would squeeze his knee under the tablecloth and remind myself that every family had their difficult person and ours was manageable. I had been wrong about that, of course, but I would not understand exactly how wrong for several more weeks. She wasn't supposed to stay longer than 3 weeks. That was what Jason told me the evening she arrived, standing in the kitchen doorway with his shoulders carrying a tightness I noticed and filed away. "She just needs to decompress," he said. "The job thing really hit her. You know how much she tied her identity to working." I looked at him for a moment longer than necessary. There was something in that stillness, deliberate, held, that was unlike his usual easy way of occupying a room. I noticed it. I didn't yet know what it was holding in place. The early warning signs were ordinary enough that I nearly missed them entirely. It began with groceries. In the first week, Sandra took over the shopping, filling the cart with things that had never appeared on any list I'd made. Expensive salmon fillets, sparkling French mineral water at $4 a bottle, a $40 face cream she left on the bathroom counter with the receipt facing upward. I told myself it was a contribution, that it would have been ungrateful to object. Then the shopping stopped. Then the cooking stopped. By the 5th week, she had settled into a routine that was, I began to understand, entirely that of a guest who assumes the stay is indefinite. Mornings in her room until 10, an hour of television, an afternoon in my reading chair, my chair, the one I had reupholstered in olive linen, with a cup of tea she hadn't thought to offer anyone else. When I came home, tired from managing a team of 12, she would look up and say, with equal measures of warmth and disinterest, "Long day," I would say always, and smile, and start dinner. It was the 3rd week of November when I heard them talking in the kitchen. I had left work early, a meeting rescheduled, 2 hours suddenly free, and came in through the back door as I sometimes did, wanting the garden first, the cold air and raised beds before stepping into the house. My hand was on the back door when their voices reached me through the glass. Not raised, not secretive, just quieter than two people need to be for an ordinary conversation, with that particular quality belonging to people who are used to speaking carefully in shared spaces. Sandra's voice first, stripped of its usual warmth, direct and certain in a way I had rarely heard from her. "She won't even notice. That account has more than you think, Jason. You've seen the statements." A pause. The sound of his coffee mug meeting the tile counter, a sound I had heard 10,000 times, now suddenly foreign. Then his voice, slow and careful. "Mom, I'm not asking for much. Patient. The patience of someone who assumes compliance in advance. Just a buffer, just enough to establish something for myself while I figure out next steps. I gave up a great deal for you. The years in that office, the sacrifices. Is it too much to ask for a little security now that I need it? Another pause. Longer. I stood absolutely still, my bag on my shoulder, the cold glass of the door against my palm, the heavy gardenia cloud of Sandra's perfume already seeping under the door frame and settling around me like something I could not leave. "She works hard," Jason said. For one bright, treacherous second, I thought there was more coming. But the sentence ended there, and then we'd have to be careful about how we do it. We'd have to be careful. I stood still for 10 more seconds. Then I opened the door, walked in, said, "Hey, you two," in my usual voice, and watched them both adjust their expressions a fraction of a second too quickly. Sandra's smile arriving on cue, Jason's shoulders dropping into performed ease. "Dinner soon," I said. "I was thinking pasta." Sandra said, "Wonderful." Jason said, "I'll set the table." I opened the refrigerator and stood with the cold air on my face for a moment, my expression hidden, my mind running fast in a very straight line. I said nothing that evening. Nothing the following evening. I am not a person who acts on partial information. I needed to understand the full structure of what was being built around me before I decided how to dismantle it. 2 mornings later, door closed, coffee going cold at my elbow, I opened our joint bank account and looked at the transaction history with the attention of someone who has decided the time for comfortable blindness is finished. The first irregular transfer was dated 7 weeks earlier, $50 to an external account. Memo, blank, then 80, then 150, then 200, then 500. I wrote down the destination account numbers and compared them digit by digit. My hand stayed steady. I made them. All the same account. 6 transfers over 7 weeks, $1,180. Out of the $3,000 I deposited each month for our shared household, quietly redirected, never mentioned, my money, my name on the account. Not once in 7 weeks of Sunday mornings and shared dinners had Jason said a single word. Something cold settled under my sternum. Not rage yet. Something quieter, the sensation of a decision forming. I called Rachel from my car in the parking structure at lunch. Flat fluorescent light, concrete walls pressing close. Rachel was a paralegal, sharp and unsentimental, the kind of friend who responded to crisis by asking what you needed rather than assuming. I told her about the kitchen. I told her about the transfers. The silence on the line had the quality of her focusing. "How long has she been there?" 5.5 weeks. Not working. Treating the house like a hotel since week 2. And he said we'd have to be careful. Not a question. Yes. A pause. Then very precisely, "Clara, check the account settings right now, authorized users, signatories, anything changed in the last 3 months. Can you do that?" The cold thing dropped another inch. "Yes," I said. "Don't change your behavior. Don't let them know you're looking. Can you hold that?" I looked at my reflection in the dark passenger window. My own face, composed and still, looking back at me with the expression of a woman who has finally understood something she cannot ununderstand. "Yes," I said. And I meant it completely. Because between the kitchen door and this parking structure, something had shifted in me, quietly, without ceremony, the way a room changes after someone has walked out and closed the door. The part of me that filed things away, that smiled and passed the bread and said thank you for casseroles she didn't want, that part had gone very cold and very still. What remained was something sharper, something that had decided at last to pay full attention. That evening, I sat across the dinner table from my husband and his mother, and I smiled, and I asked about Sandra's day, and I refilled her water glass when it was empty. My face gave away nothing. But under the table, angled away from both of them, my phone screen was open to the account settings page. The authorized user added 2 months ago was not me. It was Sandra Eleanor Hartwell. I sat at that dinner table for 45 more minutes with Sandra Eleanor Hartwell's name burning on the screen beneath my palm, and I did not say a word. I passed the Parmesan. I asked Jason whether he had heard back from the client who owed him for the brochure job. I laughed at something Sandra said about a neighbor of hers, back when she'd still had neighbors, back when she'd had her own home, her own life, a version of existence that did not run on my salary. My face was a performance I had not known I was capable of. Later, when they had both gone to their respective rooms and the house was quiet except for the refrigerator hum and the clock above the stove, I sat at the kitchen table alone and breathed very slowly, in through my nose and out through my mouth. It was not peace I was after. It was precision. I texted Rachel at 11:15. She's an authorized user, added 2 months ago. The reply came in under a minute. Screenshot everything. Come to my office tomorrow. Don't use the joint account for anything until we talk. I did not sleep well. I lay in the dark beside Jason, his breathing slow and regular, his hand loose near the edge of the pillow the way it always was, and I thought about the word we. We'd have to be careful. It had come out of his mouth with the naturalness of a word he had used before, in private, in conversations I had not been meant to hear. I thought about the month Sandra had arrived. I counted back. 8 weeks ago. The first transfer had been 7 weeks ago. The math was not subtle. She had arrived, and within the week, money had begun to leave. In the morning, I was up at 6, dressed and out the door before either of them stirred. I photographed every transaction in the account, going back 4 months, then drove to Rachel's firm, sat across from her at the small table in her office, and laid out everything I knew. Rachel was quiet for a long time. Then, the authorized user access means she can make withdrawals, transfers, not just view. Yes? Are there other accounts? Joint savings? Anything Jason opened separately? Something moved behind my ribs. There's a savings account. For the house, repairs, renovations. I've been putting $500 a month into it for 3 years. I haven't checked it recently. I watched Rachel's expression. It didn't change, but something behind it did. I'll pull it up, I said. I pulled it up. The savings account that should have held approximately $18,000, my $500 per month, 3 years of deposits, set aside for the house with my name on the deed, held $4,211. The room did not spin. I had read about rooms spinning in moments of shock, and I had always suspected it was metaphor, and I was right. The room stayed perfectly still. What moved was something inside me. A long, slow, seismic shift, the kind that rearranges load-bearing structures without making a sound. Nearly $14,000. Gone. Over what period the statements would tell me, but I already understood the shape of it. Gradual, incremental, designed to register as noise in a busy life. 100 here, 200 there, the kind of withdrawals easily overlooked by a woman working long hours and trusting her husband to be the man she had married. Clara, Rachel said, her voice very even. Today you remove Sandra's authorized access. Open a new personal account in your name only. Redirect your direct deposit and call a family attorney. before you say a single word to either of them." She held my gaze steadily. "You understand?" "Yes," I said, and I did. I understood everything now, with a clarity that was almost peaceful in its completeness. By 4 o'clock, Sandra's access had been revoked, my direct deposit redirected to a new account bearing only my name, and I had spent an hour on the phone with a family attorney named Diane Cho, dry, organized, impeccably methodical, who told me, without drama, exactly what my options were and what I needed to document them. I drove home at 5:30, parked in front of the house, and looked at the facade for a moment. The trim I had painted myself, the porch steps, the warm light in the reading nook window, my house, my deed, my money, quietly redistributed while I was at work earning more of it. I went inside. Sandra was in the kitchen, setting the table. She had made pasta, something fragrant with garlic and herbs, and a bottle of wine I didn't recognize stood open on the counter. She turned and smiled with the full warmth of a woman who has no idea the terrain has changed. "Clara, perfect timing. I thought I'd cook tonight. Give you a break." She gestured at the wine. "I picked this up this afternoon. A little treat." "With what?" I said. The smile held for exactly 1 beat too long. "I'm sorry?" "With what did you pick it up? You don't have a job, Sandra. What card did you use?" Her eyes recalibrated. A rapid, almost imperceptible reassessment moved behind them. "Jason gave me a card for household." "He did not," I said. "He doesn't have a card on the household account. I do. I put the money in that account. Which card did you use?" The kitchen went still. The sauce bubbled gently on the stove, an ordinary domestic sound that now seemed grotesque. Sandra set down the fork she was holding and lifted her chin. A gesture I had seen before, but never directed at me with this much intent. "Clara, I think you might be overreacting." "Don't do that," I said. My voice was quiet, not cold, not hot, just very clear, like water in a glass. "Don't tell me how I'm reacting. Tell me which card you used." Something shifted in her face. The warmth dropped away, and what was underneath was stripped down and calculating. The face beneath the performance. "I have been living in this house for 6 weeks, she said. "Running this household while you go off to your important job, and a bottle of wine is what you want to interrogate me about." "The wine is not what I'd like to discuss," I said. "The $14,000 is." The silence that followed had a texture, dense and pressurized, like the air before a storm. From upstairs came the sound of Jason's footsteps crossing toward the top of the stairs, then stopping. He had heard. "Come down," I said. Not loud. I didn't need to be. He appeared at the foot of the stairs in the gray hoodie I had given him for his birthday 2 years ago, and the sight of it, familiar, beloved, now somehow terrible, did something complicated that I refused to let reach my face. "Sit down," I said, "both of you." Sandra opened her mouth. I looked at her, and she stopped. She sat. Jason sat beside her, and he would not meet my eyes, which confirmed the last thing I had been waiting to confirm. I placed my phone on the table, savings account statement open on the screen. $18,400, I said. 3 years of $500 a month, deposited by me, for this house. My house, my name on the deed. I'd like someone to explain $4,211. Jason stared at the screen. His jaw moved. No words came. Jason. I looked at him only, not at her. Sandra was what she was. She had never fully pretended otherwise to anyone paying close attention. But Jason had left notes under my keys. He had held my hand during the second cup of coffee. You added her to the household account. You authorized transfers to her personal account for 7 weeks. You drained the savings account I built alone. Did you think I would never notice, or did you decide it didn't matter if I did? It wasn't like that. His voice was thin. She needed help, and I thought, you thought you could help her with my money without telling me. Not a question. Our money, the savings account is in my name only. Look at the screen, Jason, my name, my deposits. You had no legal right to touch it. Neither did she. I watched his face move through defensiveness, calculation, and then, slowly, something almost like relief. The specific exhaustion of a man who has been carrying a deception long enough that being caught is, on some level, almost a mercy. I could not afford to feel sympathy for that. What was the full plan? She retires, moves in, and I just keep depositing until she decides she's comfortable enough? Sandra spoke before he could. Her voice had recovered its steadiness, and something colder had replaced the gardenia-scented warmth. I worked my entire life to raise that boy. I am entitled to some security in my later years, and if my son's wife, who earns more in a single month than I earned in 3, cannot see her way to supporting the well-being of this family, then that says everything about her priorities. I looked at her for a long, quiet moment, the face of a woman who has delivered this argument before and found it effective. "Did you just tell me," I said, "that you are entitled to my money because you raised the man I married? I said this is a family." "Sandra," the quietest I had been all evening, "I want you to think carefully before you finish that sentence, because in 48 hours I will be sitting across from a family attorney with documented evidence of unauthorized transfers from an account bearing only my name, and everything said in this kitchen tonight will exist in my memory with perfect clarity." I let that land. I watched it move across her face. "You have 2 weeks to find other accommodation. I'll put it in writing tomorrow." I turned to Jason. "And you and I will have a longer conversation, but not tonight." I picked up my phone, turned off the stove burner under the pasta, and walked upstairs. I sat in the olive green reading chair with the lights off. The street outside was amber and quiet, the oaks barely moving. My hands were shaking. I let them shake. It was the first honest physical thing I had allowed myself all day, and I sat with it for a long time, the trembling and the cold and the hollow ache of understanding that the person you built your life with had made, week after quiet week, the choice to place someone else's comfort above your trust. Rachel called the next morning with the final piece, the one that rearranged everything. Sandra had not approached Jason after she arrived. She had called him 3 months before, while still nominally employed, already planning her exit. Rachel had spoken to a former colleague at the dental practice. Sandra had given notice voluntarily. No exhaustion, no crisis. She had planned the retirement, arranged the financial infrastructure, and called her son before she packed a single suitcase. The transfers had started 7 weeks ago because that was when the account access processed. The access had been arranged before she arrived. My husband had known about his mother's full plan. Not a vague request for help, but a structured scheme. Before she set foot in my house. His tightness in the kitchen doorway that first evening had not been guilt about something recently agreed to. It had been the weight of something already decided. I sat with that for exactly 1 day. Then I made my choices. Sandra left on a Wednesday morning, 12 days after the kitchen confrontation, with Jason driving her to her sister's house 3 towns away. She left a note on the counter, 3 lines about family and reflection. And I read it once, folded it carefully, and handed it to Diane Cho, who added it to the file without comment. The $13,700 missing from the savings account came back over 4 months through direct repayments negotiated with the attorney present. Jason did not attempt to argue the liability. He paid back what had been taken. He accepted the terms. He moved into the guest room, and what followed was the long, uncomfortable, necessary work of deciding whether a marriage can survive the specific kind of betrayal that happens not in one dramatic moment, but in weeks of quiet choices, each of them made in a direction away from you. I cannot give you a clean answer to that question even now. What I can tell you is that I am still in the house on Elm Terrace. The oaks went amber and gold again this autumn, the same cathedral they always are. And I drank my Sunday coffee on the back steps last week with my hands warm around the mug, the garden already making quiet plans for spring. Some things are different. Some things are, and I am careful with this word, more honest than they were before. I find I can build more on honesty than I ever could on the furnished comfort of a life where I pretended not to notice things I noticed. Sandra, as far as I know, found part-time work at a physiotherapy clinic 6 weeks after leaving. She has not contacted me. I have not contacted her. My reading nook has a new lamp, warm and directional, the kind that makes the whole corner feel like a separate small world. I sit there most evenings now, book open, tea cooling on the side table, the street outside, amber lit and ordinary. Nobody is in my chair when I want to sit in it. Nobody is spending money I did not agree to spend. The casserole dish Sandra left that first evening, chicken and rice, my least favorite, I gave to a neighbor who actually wanted it. Some gifts, it turns out, were never meant to be accepted.